Hilton brings you new ways to stay. With experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
You're listening to What She Said with me, Candace Sampson, and this is your weekly reminder to take up big space in life, laugh loudly, absorb new knowledge, and continue to grow and expand. What She Said is your space for the big conversations that matter and the little joys that make life sweeter. This is where empowerment meets self-care and mansplaining has no seat at the table. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's jump into it because life's too short not to embrace the good stuff while we tackle the tough stuff.
When we look to the Trump administration's take on certain kinds of what they call woke research, anything to do with being a woman, being trans, being a racialized person, like there's hundreds and hundreds of words that they have now decided they're banning from many publications. And could they then decide we are going to pull all these papers that contain any of these words from PubMed? So then you're no longer accessing any information about me as a woman. I might no longer access information about my gender, about my sex, and what that means for my health. So it's scary.
That's Misty Pratt, and in today's episode, we're talking about something you probably haven't thought about, but should. PubMed is one of the most important scientific research tools in the world, and it's at risk of being dismantled under Trump's administration. Misty joins me to explain what that means not just for Americans, but for Canadians too, especially women, and why the threat to real evidence-based science could leave us with a flood of misinformation. We also get into surprising places you can still find credible science, hello Reddit, and how Canada might step up as a global leader in science if we're really smart about it. Let's hear what she said. Misty, it's great to have you back again.
Thank you for having me again.
I wanted to have you back because you recently wrote about the potential threat to PubMed. Which is a database I think many of us take for granted. I mean, honestly, I can't remember the last time I looked at a PubMed articles, right. And most people would agree. So what exactly is at risk here, and why should we be paying attention to this?
Yeah, so PubMed is a huge database. It holds about 37 million articles right now. And that dates back to the 1940s. And the primary subject matter is medicine, health and medicine, life sciences as well, so things like psychology. And the reason it's so key is because it's free for anyone to use. It's funded by the U.S. government. And I think a lot of researchers would say PubMed is kind of where they start and end. So when you're starting a project, a research project, you go on PubMed and you do your literature review. You see what's been done before to decide how should I do my methods? How should I do my research question? And then when you're done, you're publishing your work on PubMed, right? So it's kind of like this whole life cycle. So yes, it is a bit of a worry if it were suddenly to be unavailable.
So you've worked in health research and used PubMed daily, I assume. Mm-hmm. What makes this platform so critical, not just for researchers, but for journalists, for patients, and especially for women?
Mm-hmm. So this is open access, meaning anyone can go on it and access it for free and take a look at some of the research that's available. Now, this doesn't mean that you'll always, if you're a member of the public, you may not always understand exactly what the methods are or what the outcomes are. That will take a little bit more digging and maybe talking to a care provider as well to get their input. But it does help us as patients, as the public, to arm ourselves with really good information, to be able to take that to our healthcare providers to say, look, doctors are busy. They do not have time to read new papers that have been published daily, right? So they're not always on top of things. And so if we have heard through the grapevine that there's this new study or a new trial about a drug, and we have questions, this could be really great to bring to your care provider to say, hey, I saw this research. What do you think about this?
So, what is putting PubMed at risk? What is the issue?
So the issue here, everything going on in the United States with the government right now, the cuts that they're making to HHS, the Health and Human Services Department, the issue may be, so there's a few things that could happen to PubMed. First could be that it gets taken offline completely. So there was a blackout last month, and people panicked and they thought, oh my gosh, PubMed is gone. Because at the time, websites were being pulled, they were going down.
Right.
So everyone kind of panicked a little bit. So that is a possibility, is that if the government decides we just don't want to fund this anymore, it could just be pulled completely and go dark. The other way that PubMed could be affected is, employees have to maintain this website. They have to maintain the database. And so if we start cutting, making cuts to people's jobs, we don't have employees in charge of the database anymore and updating it, then it just starts to go stale because you don't have the continuous updated, new publications that are coming out every day. And then the third piece, I think, where there's a bit of risk here is when we look to the Trump administration's take on certain kinds of what they call woke research, anything to do with being a woman, being trans, being a racialized person. Like, there's hundreds and hundreds of words that they have now decided they're banning from many publications. And could they then decide we are going to pull all these papers that contain any of these words from PubMed? So then you're no longer accessing any information about me as a woman. I might no longer access information about my gender, about my sex, and what that means for my health. So it's scary.
PubMed is government run in the US, then, correct?
Correct. So NIH, the National Institutes of Health, they have a sub-department that runs PubMed. They also have an advisory panel where they decide on which journals get in, because not all journals are legit. So the academic publishing world is full of bad actors who are trying to make money, right? And so they have a whole advisory panel of assessing new journals to decide, are these journals any good? Is this quality research that we're going to include in our database? And so that's why it's considered the best in the world, because there's so much, there's stringent measures to see whether this research is any good or not.
So until this point, until Trump's new inauguration, or his latest inauguration, PubMed was the gold standard for medical research, correct? So what happens as it becomes less reliable? And, what are we talking about when it comes to all these pseudo-scientific individuals out in the ecosphere who start to spread misinformation? Does that impact PubMed? Does PubMed become susceptible to misinformation?
It could. So if they took away this advisory panel and suddenly said, "Hey, anybody can get into PubMed. Doesn't matter. We don't want to put any limits on information sharing." What that could mean is you have journals entering who really don't have any kind of process of vetting who publishes with them. So there's this process called peer review, which is not perfect, but it's something where journals have health experts or experts in that field be able to look at this publication to say, oh, here's my thoughts, here's what they should improve, here's what methods they could clarify for me. And so there's this whole process of like, okay, we're making research a little bit better by having other experts look at it before we publish it. So if, we suddenly said, oh, any journal who does anything and publishes any kind of paper, we allow them in, then yes, all of a sudden it's potential that we could see a bit of a flooding of misinformation within PubMed. But I think if it were to go dark completely, there are some backup plans. So, PubMed also has had relationships with like Europe. So there is Europe PMC, which is a PubMed based in Europe. They have a copy of the database, but it's not a mirror copy. So if it went offline, it is possible Europe could kind of be like, okay, we're going to take the reins here and go. But there's not a lot of, unfortunately, alternatives, right? So it's just not as good. They don't have the mirror copy. Here in Canada, where I live, it's, we have nothing really. We did at one point, we had a Canada PubMed, and that got defunded in 2018, I want to say. So there's not a lot of great alternatives out there.
So that is actually where I was kind of going with my next question, because some might be listening to this and think, well, this is just an American problem. So
Right.
how and why does this affect Canadian? You said we had defunded this version in Canada?
So we had a relationship with PubMed, and then we cut that in 2018. I think the reasoning I read was that they said only 4% of people funded by CIHR, our health funder here in Canada, had actually published their publications on this Canada version. So they were kind of saying it's not really worth it because we just, so, but I think the problem is if you don't promote and build and fund something properly, it's not going to grow in the place where it's supposed to. So I think that's a little bit of a disadvantage that we have here in Canada.
Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre al app para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
So we're seeing in other sectors, though, where, countries are stepping in saying, well, you know what? Well, as Mark Carney has said, if America doesn't want to lead in world trade, we'll step in and do so. Are those opportunities here now for Canada when it comes to science? Because we are seeing a bit of a brain gain as well right now with American scientists and doctors coming north.
I absolutely think there's an opportunity, and I think there's an opportunity to open things up in terms of health information, because I think right now it's changing, but it's very protected. It's like if you want to access a certain journal article and it's behind a paywall, they're going to charge you $40, maybe more, just to read that one article. So it is, we're still in this realm of kind of academic publishing is like high up in the ivory tower and people can't really access it. So I think Canada could be a leader in saying we want good scientific information out there, but we also want to make it accessible to the public in a way that they can also use it and understand it.
Well, I was just going to say, it seems kind of crazy to me that we would paywall the truth when there's so much misinformation that we can get for free. We can access lies all day, every day, but we have to pay to get the truth?
Yes. And open access means you would pay to publish your article and allow it to be free and available to anyone. But it can be $3,000 for a researcher to be able to do that. And so not everyone does open access. And so, yes, we still have a lot of articles behind paywalls. People are unable to get them. And I just want to add one thing too here about, even if everything was open access, there is, of course, always that danger of anyone saying, I'm going to go and do my own research. And they cherry pick studies, right? So, I see this a lot in wellness influencers where they kind of look at clinical studies, which are not humans. So they're looking at cells or animals like rats. And then they're saying, oh, this proves that this supplement works, right? So there is a slight danger there too, that of course we have to still have science literacy. We have to still understand what is fact and what's kind of myth or fiction.
What scares you the most about PubMed potentially going away?
Oh gosh, I think it's the lack. Yeah, it's the lack of being able to access what we might need. So I don't work directly in research anymore, but if I think back to my previous role in research, I was on there all day long. And the thought of, I wouldn't be able to do my job. I would have been unable to do the work that I was supposed to do. And so I think there's a lot of people in the position I used to be in where they would be a little bit stuck. And I think we would be able to fix the issue and meet the problem, but it would take so much time to get there. So yeah, I worry for our scientists and our researchers.
Your book, All in Her Head, makes it clear that women's mental health care is shaped by bias and bad science. And so does what's happening now with PubMed make that situation worse for mental health as well?
I believe so. I think that if we have only made this much progress when it comes to women's health research, it's only been 30 years since it was mandated that we had to fund women's health. And now we have the smallest little bit of research available. And I think if we're falling backwards now, we lose all of that progress plus more. And so I do worry if we get to the point where certain kinds of research is allowed through, whereas the rest is banned because it says the word gender or bias or something along those lines. I think we are going backwards in time. That's what it feels like to me at this point. And I have hope. I do have hope that Canada, Europe, all of us can kind of band together and make the difference. But we also need politicians who care about science, who care about funding science, good science.
Outside of PubMed, who are you trusting for research and information? Where else do you go?
Yeah, so I do follow a lot of science influencers, as they're called, but I vet them a lot, right? So I am very careful about what's their background, what are their credentials, what are they speaking about? Are they speaking about things that they don't know anything about because they trained in, I don't know, allergy and immunology, for example, and they're talking about something to do with women's health. I mean, that to me feels a little bit red flag and a bit of a stretch, but I am looking for the people that I really trust because they're speaking from their field, their expertise, and they're also quite political at this moment in time and sharing a lot about everything that's happening in the States, in the government, all of the cuts that are happening to the health system. So, so I'm finding some people and really appreciating that they're taking the time to do this for us.
What would you say though to people? I mean, you have a solid research background. You're gonna think in terms that most people probably wouldn't think of. So let's say somebody's scrolling through their TikTok and they come across somebody who's telling them if they drink, I don't know, turmeric water with ginger, it's going to cure everything. What would you say to them to actually go and do their research? I hate when people say I did my research. What does it really mean to do your research to find out if something is credible? And, is there I guess I want to say easy way or sort of some steps you can take to ensure that information is accurate before you take action on it and do harm to yourself?
That's such a good question. And I feel like I probably don't have a wonderful answer other than to say, if you are seeing that on TikTok or Instagram or wherever, I would just stop, reflect, and say, who's saying this? So who's the person that's telling me? What stake do they have in telling me this? So if they're telling me turmeric is really good, and then you go to their website and they're selling their special turmeric supplement that has all of this added stuff, and they want you to buy their supplements, that's part of their job, then to me that would say, okay, this person has a stake in telling me that this is good for me because they're trying to sell me something. So then I would go off and say, okay, well, I'm going to try to get this information from someone who's not trying to sell me something. So what website might be able to tell me? And so then you can kind of vet the websites and say, is this reviewed literature? So oftentimes on things like WebMD and those websites, they are reviewed by physicians. And so you do have this a little bit of a level of kind of like looking things over and making sure information is correct. So you could go there and take a look and see what are other people saying. Reddit is a really awesome place to go for some information because,
good.
yeah, like science-wise, I'm impressed by the comments that people have on things where they are really debunking a lot of this stuff and pointing you in kind of a direction of where you should maybe go. So that could be a place to try. And then, of course, ask your care provider. I mean, yes, you may get some care providers who are very anti-alternative medicine. And so they're going to immediately say to you, nothing works, don't waste your money, blah, blah, blah. But then you're going to get the caring ones who say, look, I don't see any harm in you trying this. If you have the money, you want to spend this, you want to try this for your health issue, go for it. Because I think, why not? So you're going to get some differing opinions depending on who you have and who you trust with your healthcare provider. But I think if it's not harming you and it's not harming other people, maybe it is something that you feel works for you.
I think we almost need like a version of Snopes for health and wellness claims.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
You can go and enter in just keywords of things that you've come across that will tell you if it's true or not, or if it's real. I mean, there is a new weight loss cure every single day.
Oh my God.
It's just crazy to me. So you're right about this, Misty, and you're writing about PubMed, obviously. You're writing about women's health and science. What else is sort of piquing your interest right now? What else is concerning you when you look out across the landscape of everything happening in the world?
I think what's concerning me is how this is having a trickled up effect for us here in Canada. How is this going to play out for us? So I look back to the era of Harper when I was not working in healthcare at the time, but I'm now fully aware of how much scientists and researchers were muzzled in that era, and how much of an effect that had on our progress with climate change, with environmental policy, because that was really his focus, was trying to muzzle scientists to not speak about climate change as being human caused. So my fear is as we get into this election, or we're in this election, how is this having an effect? How is this going to play out with our government and what they do for science, and whether they start implementing policies that are similar to the US, where we're really kind of muzzling scientists on anything to do with what they call woke, right? Anything to do with basic human research that we need.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I think if we get a Polyev government in, that's something we could very much be looking at.
Absolutely.
And if we get a Liberal Party in, then we'll avoid that. But I think the bigger question is what do we need to put in place to avoid that entirely for any government that steps in?
Mm-hmm.
So is it something where, the CBC operates at arm's length and has its own governing board? Do we do that for science as well, so that the government can't muzzle scientists? How do we avoid that?
Yeah, I think that's hard, because when you're tied to government funding, it essentially is a bit of a muzzle anyway, right? Because you're just, you depend on that funding. So you are extra careful about what you say, because you're thinking in the back of your mind, if I don't get funding the next time, I have 200 people employed by me who are now, without a job. And so it's very scary. And so I think absolutely independent boards would help. I think partnerships with other countries can also help. Starting to build this notion of open access and open science. So we're in the kind of early baby stages of open access and open science, but it's essentially this idea of like, information in science is a human right. We all have a right to understand our bodies and what happens to our bodies. And so how do we then start to make it available to all, and also have like this, rather than competition between scientists, so me in Canada versus somebody in Switzerland who's doing similar research, instead we start collaborating, and we start opening up our data to say this data is available to everyone to use, right? With obviously a lot of regulations and stuff and checks and balances in there. But we're getting there. It's slow. It's slow because of competition. Academics need to be publishing right? It's the whole like publish or die thing. So there, of course, there is this inherent competition within academia.
So you are writing about this weekly on Substack, and of course your book is out there and you're on social media. So where can people keep up with you and what you're sharing? Because I think it's really valuable information that you are sharing with people.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would appreciate if people came and followed my Substack. So it's mistypratt.substack.com, and the publication is called All in Her Head, which is the same title as my book. But I go beyond just mental health and women. I'm definitely talking about everything that's happening in the world today when it comes to health and science.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today, Misty.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share it with someone who'd love it too. And don't forget to hit subscribe to What She Said with me, Candace Sampson, on your favorite podcast app. It's the easiest way to stay connected. Want more? Sign up for my newsletter at whatshesaidtalk.com to get all the latest updates, and let's keep the conversation going on social. You can find What She Said on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll find me on Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Candace Said. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Are your poor communication skills holding you back from being the leader you know you can be? The Master Communicator is a podcast that can help you improve your communication skills in just a few minutes a week. I'm David Tyler, a broadcaster and communication coach, and each week I deliver bite-sized masterclasses for busy leaders like you. Each episode is packed with practical techniques and strategies to help you navigate challenging conversations, delivering impactful messages, and inspire your team. Whether you're looking to enhance your executive presence, build a culture of trust, or simply lead with more confidence, the Master Communicator is your go-to resource. Subscribe now and start your journey to becoming the leader you were meant to be. Transform your communication skills, one episode at a time.
I'm Jeff Woods, and I'm shining a light on music and the rock stars who make it.
He just was one of those people, he stood out.
He was a magic guy. He really was a magic guy. We all have faults. He had the same amount of faults as we all have.
This was before Led Zeppelin. Robert was full on. I mean, he was Led Zeppelin without the band behind him. He had the hair, the jeans, the whole thing, you know, and he was amazing.
The Records and Rockstars podcast, heard around the world and yours to hear wherever you get podcasts. All the episodes from jeffwoodsradio.com.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.